It is always hard to follow the students, but it's definitely better than going the other direction. They certainly don't want to hear about strategic planning, but the presentation tonight is meant to provide us a little bit of a look back at the last time the district went through strategic planning back in 2012-13, because we're about to go forward into the next round of strategic planning, and it's a good opportunity for our community members to get involved and see where we are. So I made this presentation, and Mr. Brzee joined me about 2 months ago now, a month and a half, 2 months ago, to all of our faculty at each school. And I will use my notes for this first section because what I was able to do is get Dr. Crater's specific presentation notes for when she announced the goals of the last strategic plan to the community back in 2012-13. So we're starting back there, see where we've been, and then talk about where we're going to. These were the 5 categories of goals last time around. Technology, communications, school environment, 21st century learning, and assets. And assets meant a lot of different things. We'll go into each of these very, very briefly. So I wanted to highlight how far things have come in a relatively short period of time. So 7 years ago, there was no Google Chromebook initiative in the district. There weren't Google Apps for Education. We didn't have technology support the way we do today. We certainly didn't have the infrastructure we have now to support ubiquitous wireless throughout the district. Things that we kind of take for granted is just our way of doing business today. That was all part of the goal setting process 7 or 8 years ago when this started in the community for the 2012-13 plan. On the side of communication, the district, with this presentation, launched its Facebook page for the first time. So there was no social media presence when this process started. The position that Ms. Regan now holds of a communications coordinator was created as part of the last strategic plan to increase the ability to get the stories out about the school district. The website took on a new look, and you know about the logo and the motto as well. In school environment, one of the items that came out was the need to develop more consistent character education across the 4 elementary schools. And actually, in just the past year, thanks to some partnerships across the PTOs, we've done a great deal of work in increasing that continuity even more, not only in character education, but also just in general assembly programs. Same thing with how do we manage behavior in the 4 elementary schools, especially consistency across the community. So even while managing 4 neighborhood elementary schools, how do we make sure that the experience is comparable across them? On 21st century learning, that term almost is starting to sound dated already now that we're starting to think about a 2020 strategic plan. But it was about the real world applications, scenario-based instruction that takes place in classrooms today much more regularly than it did before. Our staff development services, so making sure that all of our faculty get the instruction they need so that they can provide the instruction that our kids need. Some of you, I know, have attended some of the curriculum parent information sessions that have been held. Some topics are more successful than others, but there was an effort to try to increase the coordination of getting that information out to parents. And on the assets, this is probably the area where we made the least amount of progress. There was a goal set back in 2012-13 to bring back to life the Warren Township Education Foundation. Right after that goal was set, a group of people started working on it in earnest and struggled. Another group started about a little over a year ago, and is also struggling. So if there are people in the audience today who think that this is a way that they might want to get involved, we would love to hear from you, because there are a small group of people who are out there really dedicated to raising funds outside of what the PTOs do for big, large-scale projects across the district. And this motto, Shining Brighter Every Day, and this logo were both brand new with the last strategic plan. So there was a strong effort in bringing together and branding the district. I should mention that that logo is in the final stages of being patented so that nobody else can use it across the country. It was created sort of in a partnership between a student competition at the middle school at the time and one of our staff members who kind of brought it together for the final product. I know it's kind of small, but some of the highlights I wanted to bring up were how things have changed as far as the vision and the mission of the district. So the mission statement back in 2012-13 used the term New Jersey Core Curriculum Content Standards, and it talked about that as an expectation that all students will achieve the New Jersey Core Curriculum Content Standards. The reason I highlight that is because I have not yet met a parent in Warren Township who believes that our standard should be meeting the minimum expectations of the state of New Jersey. And you can see if you move to the right, the mission statement that was written back as part of this process and updated 2 years ago, it's about much more than that. So there are, the whole child tenets are built into it to make sure that not only do we meet the basic academic needs, but that we go beyond that in a challenging curriculum and other kinds of experiences. I also want to highlight change in the 7 or 8 years since the last process. So as far as the Board of Education is concerned, we have 9 members that are new now from when the 2012-13 strategic plan was adopted. At the district administrative level, it's almost entirely changed since the 2012-13 plan. Ms. Lenhart had just started as business administrator, so she's one of the few that crosses over both sides there. At the building level, not only are all 5 school principals and the assistant principal at the middle school new, but our enrollment has changed. And you can see that shift. So that those adjustments have an impact on the implementation of different kinds of programs. Now, we've talked a few times in the last few months about the demographic report, which we should have a final document very soon. We're seeing the trend suggesting that the bottom of enrollment is very near, and we will start going back up. We also know that there is housing development of about 1,000 new units coming to Warren Township, which should accelerate it, but certainly a difference from when the last strategic plan was written to now. That changes in other places too. It's not just in our school district. We have change at the state and national level, which matters for education policy and priority setting when we get into strategic planning. You know, the time when I made the presentation was a little closer to the Super Bowl, so the Patriots reference was a little bit more appropriate at the time. But one thing I wanted to highlight, and we even have one of our members in the audience today, is that the 5 Excellence in Education recipients from 2012-13 are all still working in the schools today with children. And my message to the staff was how important their input will be to the process. And Mr. Brzee echoed that, because when we start creating our teams for strategic planning, it's important that the people who are working with the kids day in and day out have a voice in that process, get involved, and participate when we create our teams. So what does this look like from now through the end of the next plan? So typically, strategic plans are 5 years. We're about a year or so behind. We went through a lot of transition, obviously, with a new superintendent coming on board as well. But we are now kicking off so that we have a 2019-20 process to create the next 5-year strategic plan. This is the objective, but we also have an opportunity that we talked about back in November, December at the board table of becoming a leader in the area of strategic planning around the whole child tenets. And we talked about what that might look like and what resources we can bring on. A lot of districts talk about that, but how do we set goals that are specifically tied to that mission? This is from last time around. The structure of strategic planning in most districts and most communities follows a model sort of like this, where you have kind of an umbrella committee that's made up of board members, administrators, faculty and staff, and community members. And then you have subcommittees. Last time there were the 5: communications, environment, 21st century learning, technology, assets, and then brand was a separate subcommittee. So that's probably the kind of model we'll look at again. And the final result is the board adopts a strategic plan that has within it 3 to 5 big goals, like last time. And then we work, administrative and staff, on how do we measure our progress towards that goal, like our kids just talked about, each year along that 5-year continuum, so that we know that we're making adequate progress, that we can change direction if the time's off. And forget about the words on here, but the timeline specifically is that we are right now about to convene the ad hoc strategic planning committee of the board. I think our meeting is on April 24th, right after spring break, where the board will review with administration the request for proposals for a facilitator to come in to do this process with the community. We hope to have that person approved by the end of the school year, so that when we come back in September, we're ready to launch with community events. And you may remember from last time, there's an event called the World Cafe, where community members are invited in. You typically ask, I can not feel like I'm yelling. We typically ask community members, what are we doing well? Where do we need to improve? And then we start talking about how do we bring those things together, what's the vision, and how do we get there. And then once we start to gel around some big ideas, that's when subcommittees would get developed, and there would be a lot of opportunity for community members to get involved on those subcommittees and become a part of it. So we're in the winter, spring 2019 piece now with the RFP. Planning will take place over the summer to launch with the community, probably around October, with our staff either at the in-service to open the school year or the Columbus Day in-service. We'll work throughout the winter to get to a plan. Our target is 11 months from now, March 2020, with the board having a plan that it can adopt so that we can then move forward. So that is the overview of the strategic planning process. The board has a copy of the presentation.